If you make, say, $150,000 a year, mathematically speaking, you are likely building wealth a lot slower than the person next door who's maybe making half your salary.
I know, it sounds completely backwards to how we're taught to think about money.
Totally does. But today, we're doing a deep dive into this massive stack of financial psychology sources. And they all basically prove why our modern image of the millionaire, you have driving the Bentley, is mostly just a portrait of total financial fragility.
Yeah, we all carry around this grand illusion of what wealth actually is.
Right. I mean, you close your eyes and picture a millionaire, and it's always a 20-something tech startup founder in a hoodie.
Or an investment banker just dripping in designer labels.
Exactly. But the data we are unpacking today completely shatters that mirage for you, because the real millionaire next door is probably driving a 10-year-old used Ford.
Yep. And they're living in a surprisingly average neighborhood.
And running a really boring regional wholesale beverage distributorship or a mid-sized dental practice.
That stark contrast right there between what we assume wealth looks like and how wealth actually operates, that is the entire foundation of our mission for this deep dive.
And we have a lot of material to get through to prove this.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at everything from Morgan House's Psychology of Money to the really polarized legacy of Napoleon Hill's classic Think and Grow Rich from back in 1937.
Plus modern financial strategists like MJ DeMarco and Brian Spectrum.
It is. But all these sources converge on one critical thesis. Doing well with money has surprisingly little to do with how smart you are.
Which is a relief, honestly.
Right. It doesn't even have much to do with how much raw capital you have access to. It has almost everything to do with 100%. The consensus across the board is that wealth generation is roughly 80% psychology and 20% mechanical knowledge.
Wow. 80-20?
Yeah. You could literally possess a genius-level IQ, hold multiple advanced degrees in finance, but if you don't master your own behavioral impulses, self-sabotage is basically inevitable.
I think the two.
We really do. We treat a high salary as the absolute finish line.
Right, completely forgetting that income is just the raw material. It's just the money flowing into the bank account from a job or a business. Net worth is what you actually manage to build with it once you subtract all liability.
And that brings up the Nadlin Capital Group analysis. They highlight this phenomenon they call the lifestyle inflation trap.
Oh, this is fascinating.
It perfectly illustrates how a high income can actually prevent someone from building a high net worth. So they outline this scenario with person A. Person A earns an impressive $150,000 a year.
Great salary.
Great salary. But person A has built a lifestyle that costs $145,000 a year to maintain.
Ouch. So they're only left with $5,000 in savings.
Exactly, just $5,000. Then the source looks at person B. Person B earns a much more modest $80,000 a year.
Which is nearly half the salary.
Right. But person B intentionally keeps their living expenses capped at $1,000. So person B is saving $25,000 annually.
Making double their salary.
Yeah. Despite the massive income advantage of person A, person B is compounding actual wealth at a radically faster pace. Because wealth is not the money you earn.
It's the money you keep.
It's the money you retain. A high salary merely provides the opportunity to build wealth. But if every outward indicator of that salary, the upgraded house, the leased luxury vehicle, the club memberships, if all of that just consumes the cash flow, the net worth stays completely flat or even goes negative.
Morgan Housel actually captures this perfectly in Psychology of Money.
I love that quote.
It's the closet full of just functional, average-priced clothes instead of seasonal designer labels.
Spending money to explicitly show people how much money you have is literally the most efficient way to reduce the amount of money.
Exactly.
Oh, this concept is so revealing.
It really is. So when a person sees someone driving a sleek, say, $200,000 sports car, they're almost never specific individual is so successful and admirable.
Never. They don't care about the driver at all.
Right. Instead,
The brutal irony is that if they actually went out and bought the car, the people they're trying to impress wouldn't admire them.
exactly. Those people would just be doing the exact same thing, ignoring the driver and picturing themselves behind the wheel.
We purchase these luxury goods under the assumption they'll generate respect and admiration, completely failing to realize that the observers are just using our expensive possessions as a benchmark for their.
It's a completely unwinnable game. And this specific psychological trap is why the individuals who actually hold the majority of wealth in the economy are so deliberately stealthy about it.
Yeah. Ben Carlson's analysis of the top 1% of earners in the U.S. provides some staggering data on this. It really shatters that whole Silicon Valley myth.
The myth that everyone rich just built an app and sold it for $1 billion.
Exactly. The vast majority of this wealth isn't originating from lottery ticket, tech startups, or viral. As of 2022, the share of income generated simply by owning medium-sized, highly conventional regional businesses had grown to roughly 35% for the top earners.
35%.
Yeah. The data points to around 1.6 million business owners with a net worth of $10 million or more.
And what kind of businesses are we talking about here?
We are talking about grocery store chains, mid-sized law firms, plumbing supply companies, auto dealers.
So profoundly unglamorous, steady, boring enterprises.
The most boring businesses you can imagine. And Carlson points out that 80% of these millionaires are first generation.
Wait, 80%?
80%. They didn't inherit their capital, they built it from scratch. And furthermore, they tend to intentionally live in neighborhoods where non-millionaires outnumber them 3 to 1.
Literally hiding in plain sight.
Hiding in plain sight because they have internalized that critical difference between adopting the aesthetic of wealth and actually possessing it.
It's like, well, let's use a simple plumbing analogy here.
Okay.
Think of your finances.
Okay, a bathtub.
Your income is the water flowing from the faucet. Your spending is the drain at the bottom. Your actual net worth is the water level in the tub.
That's a great way to visualize it.
So society focuses almost entirely on the size of the. We're all getting a bigger. The drain is held wide open. It doesn't matter how powerful the water pressure is, the tub will remain empty.
Exactly. But if the underlying mechanics are really that simple, just plug the drain so the water level naturally rises, it forces us to ask a really tough question.
Why is it so hard for people to do?
Right. Why do so many highly educated, hyper-intelligent professionals struggle so immensely with this? We all know doctors, corporate executives, senior attorneys who pull in massive annual salaries, but are functionally drowning in debt.
Sitting on entirely negative net worths.
Exactly. Why is it so difficult for these high earners to simply plug the drain?
Well, the drain in that analogy isn't mechanical.
It is entirely psychological. High-income professionals are uniquely susceptible to the overwhelming expectation of maintaining appearances.
Yeah, I mean, if a person achieves the status of a senior partner at a law firm, both society and their immediate peer group basically expect them to occupy a specific zip code.
They expect them to enroll their children in prestigious private schools, wear a specific tier of luxury watch,
Drive a specific class of imported vehicle.
Exactly. The higher the income climbs, the heavier the societal pressure becomes to visibly prove that the income exists.
So they end up stacking massive, compounding liabilities, mortgage, luxury car lease, credit card balances, just to maintain the aesthetic of success that their peers expect.
Their financial drain is held permanently open by ego and social expectation. It proves that our psychological wiring way, more than our ability to operate a spreadsheet, truly dictates our financial reality.
And that transitions us directly into the
No one is crazy. It's such a profound shift in perspective.
It is someone else's financial decisions, whether it's blowing a paycheck on lottery tickets or hoarding cash under a mattress. It looks totally irrational to us.
Well, completely crazy.
But to the person making the decision, in that specific moment, It makes perfect logical sense based on their own unique generational and socioeconomic experience.
And developing that kind of financial empathy requires understanding just how narrow our personal view of the world actually is.
Narrow is the right word for it. Housel points out that your individual lived experience with money makes up perhaps a fraction of a percent of what has actually happened in the global economy over the last century.
A tiny fraction.
Right. But it makes up roughly 80% of how you believe the world works. We constantly judge people based on a map of the world they were never handed.
Consider the modern concept of retirement, right? We currently treat it as a fundamental law of personal finance. It's like it's always been this way.
But it hasn't.
Not at all. The 401k, which is the absolute backbone of American retirement planning, the vehicle everyone uses to funnel money into the stock market, that was only created in 1978.
1978, that is so recent.
The Roth IRA didn't even exist until 1998. The entire concept of a self-funded retirement, where an average worker builds a diversified stock portfolio to live off in their final decades, is a brand new invention in the timeline of human history.
So for thousands of years before that, you simply worked till you physically relied on your family or fortune if you were lucky.
Exactly. So we look at older generations or individuals from vastly different economic backgrounds, and we judge them harshly for their lack of market participation or their extreme risk aversion. But regardless of the specific generational map someone is holding, Housel identifies one psychological hurdle that universally destroys financial stability across all.
Moving goalposts.
Inability to get the goalpost to stop moving. It is the deadliest financial trap.
So a person is satisfied when they reach 5,000.
Right. They reach 75,000 and suddenly the baseline shifts. They now feel they absolutely require 100,000 to feel secure.
This perpetual dissatisfaction is driven entirely by social comparison, isn't it?
Entirely. Modern consumer capitalism is an incredibly efficient engine for generating two things: unprecedented wealth and unprecedented envy.
Envy is the killer there. The ceiling of social comparison is so astronomically high that trying to out-earn your peers is basically an unwinnable battle.
You cannot win it. The only way to win is to refuse to step onto the battlefield. You have to explicitly define what enough is for yourself.
Because if you don't, that insatiable moving target will eventually push you to take catastrophic just to keep.
And this is further complicated by a psychological glitch the sources refer to as the end of history illusion.
I love a strange cognitive blind spot we all seem to share.
We all have it.
If you look back at who you were 10 years ago, you can easily recognize how drastically your personality, your desires, and your goals have changed.
Oh, completely. I am a different person.
Exactly. Static for the next 10, 20, or 30 years.
End of history illusion makes long-term financial planning incredibly fragile. Think about a 25-year-old. They might have been perfectly happy grinding 80-hour work weeks for the next 3 decades just to hit a specific multi-million-dollar net worth target.
And so they lock themselves career paths and massive mortgages.
Completely failing to account for the fact that the 45-year-old version of themselves might value having weekends off to spend with their children way more than having a maximum net worth.
This failure to anticipate our own rigid financial extreme lead to profound regret.
Well, if extreme rigidity is dangerous, that leads to a fascinating concept from Housel regarding how we should actually construct our financial plans. He argues that aiming to be reasonable is vastly superior to aiming to be rational.
I struggled with this initially. I really did. Because isn't the entire premise of personal finance be coldly mathematical, spreadsheet level rational?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. You run the numbers and you execute the optimal math.
Well, on a spreadsheet in a vacuum, pure rationality works perfectly. But in reality, where humans experience fear, anxiety, and exhaustion, strict rationality often fails catastrophically.
The psychological brilliance of aiming for a reasonable financial plan is that it actively accounts for human emotion. The text provides a perfect example to illustrate this. The decision to pay off a mortgage when interest rates are historically low.
Let's break that down. If a homeowner secures a mortgage at, say, a 3% interest rate, and the stock market historically averages around an 8 to 10% annual return,
it is mathematically irrational to extra. The strictly rational move to carry the cheap debt and invest every spare dollar into the market. Between the 3%.
The math on that is totally flawless. But behaviorally, it might be entirely the wrong decision for a specific.
Right, because if carrying hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt causes a person low-level chronic anxiety every single day.
And if having a completely paid-off home provides them with a profound sense of psychological security and allows them to sleep peacefully at night,
then prioritizing the mortgage payoff is a highly reasonable choice, even if it is mathematically suboptimal.
You are essentially sacrificing a few percentage points of optimal return to purchase emotional resilience.
A good enough, mathematically imperfect financial plan that a person can actually stick with during a terrifying, headline-dominating market crash is infinitely more valuable than a perfectly rational, hyper-optimized plan that the person abandons in a panic the second their portfolio drops 20%.
The goal is to manage money in a way that maximizes your ability to sleep, prioritizing resilience.
So if a mathematically suboptimal choice is a reasonable one, or how we train that.
Oh boy, yes they have.
Which
published right in the aftermath of the Great Depression. The book was supposedly the result of Andrew Carnegie commissioning Hill to study hundreds of the era's most successful. Right, to distill the absolute secret to accumulating wealth.
Steps to riches. The bedrock of his entire philosophy is that all wealth begins with a burning desire. It cannot be a mere wish or a casual preference for money.
Dominates the mind.
He introduces actionable concepts like autosuggestion, which involves repeatedly affirming your goals to program the subconscious mind, and the mastermind, the practice of surrounding yourself with a carefully curated group of equally driven individuals to amplify your efforts.
But nested within these relatively standard self-help concepts is where the methodology takes a very sharp turn into the bizarre.
Yeah, we have to address step 10, the mystery of sex transmutation.
You can't skip it.
When I read this section, it literally was a Charity's radio broadcast.
It really reads like one.
Use that sexual representing creative energy. Urge away from its natural expression and redirect it entirely into their business strategies and financial planning. It will elevate them to a higher sphere of creative thought and almost guarantee immense wealth.
It's certainly the most heavily scrutinized and criticized aspect of his methodology, but its inclusion highlights the deeply polarized nature of this text. Exploring this debate impartially is vital because it encapsulates the modern tension we all feel regarding the balance between internal mindset and external reality.
The reviews are a fascinating sociological study in themselves. On one end of the spectrum, you have readers leaving impassioned 5-star reviews, literally crediting this single book for their entire multi-million-dollar fortunes.
They argue that Hill's relentless focus on desire, faith, and persistence completely rewired their approach to life and business.
But on the opposite end, the 1-star reviews offer blistering critique. They attack the book for relying on blatant assertions about vibrating in the ether and tuning the brain to communicate with infinite intelligence.
Beyond the critiques of mysticism, the negative reviews present a very sharp socioeconomic. Many readers point out that Hill's philosophy is entirely devoid of systemic context.
By asserting that wealth is solely the result of a perfectly maintained mindset and a burning desire, the inverse implication is that poverty or business failure is strictly a personal moral failing.
If someone is struggling in systemic poverty, Hill's framework basically suggests is simply because they didn't desire wealth strongly enough. or because they allowed negative vibrations into their mind.
Several reviewers categorize this as toxic victim blaming. They argue that telling an individual facing severe economic primary obstacle is a lack of burning desire is deeply offensive.
Because it completely ignores the external realities of macroeconomic shifts, class barriers, and the profound impact of sheer random luck.
The text remains a massive tug of war nearly a century later. It forces us to begin.
Morgan Housel actually addresses this exact tension in his work through the twin concepts of luck and risk. He notes that they are two sides of the exact same coin.
You cannot truly believe in the power of individual effort and agency without equally respecting the immense power of.
Exactly. Not every financial failure is the result of a massive financial triumph is the result of pure genius. Sometimes the market moves for you, and sometimes it moves against you.
Stripping away the 1930s mysticism regarding vibrating ethers, it begs a very practical question. If simply wishing for wealth and sending positive vibrations into the universe is magical thinking, is there any actual tangible scientific mechanism behind Hill's concept of autosuggestion and relentless visualization?
We can actually bridge the gap between Hill's early mysticism and modern empirical science by looking at the sources from Better Up Than Wealth psychology coach Rashida.
Oh, this is where it gets really.
The mechanism at play is not magic. It is the proven science of neuroplasticity. The human brain physically alters its structure and neural pathways based on repeated thoughts and behaviors.
I think we need to break down. So if visualizing goals isn't sending a cosmic signal to the universe to deliver a pile of cash, what is it actually doing inside the skull?
It all revolves around a network in the brain called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The RAS, okay.
The RAS acts as a filtering mechanism. At any given moment, your brain is bombarded with millions of bits of sensory data. Sights, sounds, conversations, advertisements. Completely overload. So the RAS filters out anything it deems irrelevant and only allows information that aligns with your current focus to reach your conscious awareness.
So it operates almost like a bouncer at a crowded nightclub inside your brain, aggressively blocking the millions of irrelevant details and only letting the VIP information through the door.
That's a perfect analogy. By intensely visualizing specific financial goals or business opportunities, you are essentially handing that bouncer a highly specific VIP list.
You aren't manifesting opportunities out of thin air. You are systematically retraining your reticular activating system to spot the opportunities, the connections, and the subtle market shifts that were already existing in your environment.
But that your bouncer was previously filtering out because you hadn't marked them as important.
Dr. Carol Dweck's foundational research on the said integrated for wealth coaching provides the framework.
Yes. If an individual operates with a fixed mindset, they believe their traits and skills are completely static.
They tell themselves, I am just naturally bad with numbers, or I am not an entrepreneur.
And because they believe growth is impossible, their internal bouncer actively ignores opportunities to learn about investing or business, treating that information as irrelevant.
An individual operating with a growth mindset utilizes the power of.
Yet, it's so powerful.
They mastered stock market fundamentals yet. That single linguistic shift completely rewires the brain's perception of failure. Failure is no longer a permanent identity. It is simply a temporary data point on continuum of learning.
And suddenly, the bouncer starts letting in educational resources, mentorship opportunities, and constructive criticism because the goal of mastery has been placed on the VIP list.
Visualization and targeted affirmations don't alter the fabric of the universe to serve you. They alter you, optimizing your perception so that you can navigate the reality of the universe more effectively.
Clearly, holding the right mindset and noticing opportunities won't magically pay the mortgage on its own.
No, the internal psychology has to eventually translate into external mechanics. We have to move from merely thinking to actually building. Which brings us to the financial mechanics outlined by MJ. His concept.
MJ DeMarco positions himself as a highly aggressive counter voice to the traditional financial guru.
He vehemently rejects standard
finally, achieve wealth when you're too old to fully enjoy it.
Right. Decades of your life is a flawed contract, and he advocates for rapid wealth creation through specific structural mechanics.
He argues for rapid wealth, but he is very clear that this isn't a scam or a get-rich-quick scheme. It is governed by a strict principle he calls the law of affection.
The amount of wealth you accumulate is directly tied to the magnitude or the scale of the value you provide to others.
The law of affection requires divorcing your income from your time.
Because in a standard job, which DeMarco calls the slow lane, your income is inextricably linked.
But a fast lane business is built on scale. You are creating a piece of software, a content platform, or a product that just downloaded or consumed by thousands or millions of people simultaneously.
24 hours a day, regardless of whether you're actively working, sleeping, or on vacation.
It's the difference between being a massage therapist who can only physically see 8 clients and an entrepreneur who invents a new massage tool and sells 50,000 units on Amazon.
But synthesizing DeMarco's available wealth with Brian Tracy's fundamental rules for money, friction.
Oh, the contrast here is amazing. Brian Tracy states that rule number 1 of money is don't lose money. And rule number 2 is refer back to rule number 1.
That friction highlights the profound difference between the skills required to get wealthy and the skills wealthy requires an individual to be a relentless optimist. You have to be willing to take calculated risks, step away from the security of the herd, and possess an almost delusional belief that your highly scalable fast lane business idea is going to succeed despite the statistical odds.
Staying wealthy requires the exact opposite psychological profile.
It requires deep paranoia.
It requires an obsessive level of paranoia and frugality. It requires the humility to recognize that markets will inevitably crash, unexpected global events will disrupt supply chains, and massive emergency expenses will arise.
On the other end, you are hyper-paranoid about the short-term obstacles that might prevent you from surviving long enough to see that progress materialize.
And the ultimate reward for surviving those short-term risks and keeping your paranoia is experience.
We use the word compounding constantly in finance, but Housel provides a statistic about Warren Buffett that forces you to completely reevaluate how it works.
This stat is just mind-blowing.
At the time, Housel was $84.5 billion. The staggering detail is that $81.5 billion of that total was accumulated after his 65th birthday.
It is nearly impossible for the human brain to intuitively grasp that kind of exponential growth. We operate in a linear world. We expect that if we put in 1 unit of effort, we get 1 unit of result.
But is exponential.
He has been allowing his investments to compound continuously, without interruption, for roughly 3/4 of a century. The math simply goes parabolic in the later decades.
Marshita Seta expands on this concept beautifully by pointing out that the law of compound interest isn't restricted to financial. It applies to every single behavioral input in your life.
If you dedicate just 30 minutes a day to reading about your industry, that daily habit compounds into reading 50 books a year, which over a decade compounds into a massive, insurmountable advantage in specialized knowledge.
A small, consistent daily effort to provide value to your network compounds into an incredibly powerful professional circle. Your daily integrity compounds into a rock-solid, lucrative reputation.
Compounding is the ultimate mechanic of human progress. Tiny, seemingly insignificant daily actions aggregate into exponential results over long time horizons.
But to capture financial compounding, you must build systems that allow for it. This is why the wealthy obsessively focus their energy on acquiring and building assets, things that passively put money into their pockets, rather than accumulating liabilities, things that constantly demand money out of their pockets.
The sources, particularly Marshita Saeed's coaching materials, heavily emphasize the necessity of building multiple income streams to accelerate this process. combining earned income with profit, dividend payouts, rental income, and royalties.
But wait, if someone is listening to this while currently grinding through a 50-hour work week at their primary job just to cover the mortgage, the advice to suddenly go out and establish 7 different streams of income doesn't sound like a blueprint for wealth. It sounds like a fast track, severe clinical burnout. Is this actually real?
That is a critical reality check. And the necessary clarification is that these multiple income streams are built sequentially over time, never simultaneously.
Okay, that makes a lot.
The danger of relying solely on a single W-2 paycheck is the extreme fragility it creates. A single corporate layoff plunges you immediately into financial crisis.
But escaping fragility is a gradual process. By the Stanford marshmallow experiment.
Classic study on delayed gratification. The children who could resist eating 1 marshmallow immediately in order to receive 2 marshmallows 15 minutes later ended up having drastically better.
Exactly the same principle applies to sequential asset building. You take a predetermined percentage of the income from your primary, and instead of purchasing a depreciating liability that provides an immediate dopamine hit like financing a new boat, you delay gratification and purchase your first income-producing asset.
Perhaps you start by slowly building a portfolio of dividend-paying index funds. You let that single new stream run and compound quietly in the background.
Years later, you might leverage your industry knowledge into a small consulting side hustle. Years after that, you might use the compounded capital to purchase a rental.
Over decades, these individual streams mature. The ultimate goal is that the combined output of your assets eventually surpasses your living expenses, permanently divorcing your survival from your need to trade hours for dollars.
Broken down the illusion of the psychology of the moving goalposts, the neuroplasticity desire, the necessity of scalable fast lane systems, and the exponential power of compounding assets.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But stepping back from all the mechanics and the psychology, it forces a massive existential question. What is the actual end game of all of this effort? Why are we white-knuckling our impulses, delaying gratification, and meticulously hoarding these assets in the first place?
This brings us to what is arguably the most profound insight found in Morgan Housel's work. The true fundamental purpose of accumulating money is not to purchase luxury goods or signal status to strangers.
The highest absolute form of wealth, the ultimate dividend that money pays, is the ability to wake up every single morning, look at the day ahead, and genuinely say, I can do whatever I want today.
Controlling your own time is the highest possible dividend.
It completely shifts the paradigm. The goal isn't to buy a yacht. The goal is to purchase your own autonomy. You are buying back the hours of your life from the demands of other people.
Howells references a comprehensive 1981 psychological study regarding what fundamentally makes humans happy. The researchers found that the most dependable predictor of positive feelings wasn't a person's income bracket,
Or their geographic location, or the prestige of their career.
Right. The single strongest predictor of well-being was the feeling of having a strong sense of control over one's own life.
Money's greatest intrinsic value, far beyond its purchasing power for material, its unique ability to give you control over your own time and choices.
And this realization leads to a piece of financial advice in the text that feels entirely counterintuitive to everything we are normally taught.
Yeah, in traditional personal finance, we are drilled to save money for a specific, tangible goal. You save for a 20% down payment on a house, you save for a replacement vehicle, you save for a child's college tuition.
But these sources argue that you should actively save money with any specific reason at all. Just save it for the sake of saving it.
Saving without a designated spending goal provides you with the two most valuable resources imaginable in a highly unpredictable, volatile world: flexibility and.
If you possess a substantial reserve of unassigned savings, you have flexibility. If you lose your job, you have the runway to wait for a fantastic career opportunity that aligns with your skills, rather than being forced to accept the first miserable job you were offered out of sheer desperation.
You have a leeway to pause and learn a completely new high-paying skill. You have an invisible shield erected against life's inevitable disasters.
Housel refers to this as building a margin of safety. You have to inherently plan for the plan to not go according to plan.
Because every single person will eventually face massive, terrifying expense, sudden loss of income that they could not have possibly. sheet.
And this reliance on a margin of safety also directly combats a fascinating psychological quirk that Housel identifies as the seduction of pessimism.
We see this today. Or imminent, it sounds incredibly intelligent.
Pessimism naturally sounds profound. It triggers our evolutionary survival instincts, so it sounds like someone is trying to protect us.
Optimism, the assertion that the market will generally trend upward over the next decade, often sounds like a cheap, sleazy sales pitch.
Because bad news and disasters happen incredibly fast. A market crash, a bank failure, or a pandemic can alter the world in a single day. So pessimism commands our immediate, undivided attention.
But good news, like the slow, methodical compounding of economic growth, technological advancement, and happens so gradually that it rarely generates headlines.
The supreme danger of the seduction of pessimism is that it paralyzes us. We become so captivated by the doomsayers that we freeze in fear. We pull our money out of the market. We stop building assets. And as a result, we completely miss out on decades of compounding growth.
Okay, but if the goal is to ignore the pessimism, constantly delay gratification, save endlessly without a specific goal, and maintain a healthy dose of paranoia about losing what we've built, how do we ensure we don't just transform into miserable financial hoarders?
That is the big question.
Because there are plenty of people who build massive, multi-million-dollar bank accounts, but spend their entire lives living in constant fear, never actually enjoying a single fruit of their labor.
Maintaining that balance is the ultimate test of financial psychology. It requires a fundamental shift in understanding what actually brings you joy.
It is not about ascetic deprivation.
No, it's about recognizing that the joy derived from purchasing a luxury item, a designer bag, is entirely fleeting. The dopamine hit evaporates in a matter of weeks, and then the baseline resets.
But the joy of knowing you possess an invisible shield against disaster. The deep, resonant joy of knowing that if your manager becomes abusive, you possess the financial autonomy to simply stand up, pack your desk, and walk away without a second thought. That joy is permanent.
It provides a constant underlying baseline of peace. When you save without a goal, you aren't hoarding money out of a miserly fear. You are actively purchasing your own future freedom, hour by hour, day by day.
You are continuously buying your own autonomy. To wrap up this massive deep dive into the psychology and mechanics of wealth, what we've uncovered from this incredible stack of sources is that true wealth is entirely devoid of magic.
It isn't found in a secret vibrational frequency.
And
True wealth is found in the unglamorous, steady, resilient businesses. It's found in the humility to make reasonable financial choices that protect your emotional well-being and help you sleep at night, rather than pursuing perfectly rational choices that induce constant stress.
It's found in utilizing neuroplasticity to retrain your brain to spot opportunities, and then possessing the relentless discipline to let those assets quietly compound over decades, entirely ignoring the shiny, depreciating liabilities everyone else is desperately financing to look successful.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought drawn directly from synthesizing all these materials. Morgan Housel makes the astute observation that in the modern world, raw intelligence is no longer a reliable competitive advantage, but behavioral flexibility is.
So if building true wealth ultimately comes down to suppressing the urge to buy status symbols today in order to guarantee more options tomorrow, then wealth is ultimately defined by the gap between your income and your ego.
The gap between your income and
So perhaps the most lucrative financial skill you could ever possibly master has absolutely nothing to do with analyzing candlestick stock charts, timing real estate market trends, or mastering complex Excel spreadsheets.
Perhaps the single greatest financial skill you can develop is simply learning to master your ego.
Because if you can master your ego, you no longer require the Bentley to prove to strangers that you've made it. You are perfectly, deeply content driving the used Ford, knowing with absolute certainty that your time belongs entirely to you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the true nature of wealth. We invite you to take a hard look at your own financial bathtub, check the status of your looks like. Until next time.